So just a warm welcome from CTU side to all our attendees who are here today. We appreciate that you are taking part in our corporate webinars, and we try to maintain topics that are very relevant to not just national, but to various industries. Today, we're focusing on governance. Regardless of if you are working in the government sector, the value of this webinar is for anyone. So we just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us today. I represent CTU. I'll be facilitating and coordinating, but I will definitely not be the expert here. I'm going to introduce the experts, starting with Johan Stein. So I think, Johan, if you can just give a quick introduction for yourself.
Colleen and team at CTU, thanks again for this wonderful opportunity. Welcome, everyone. I look forward to hearing your comments and your questions. And Avi, also great to have you here. I work in AI consulting, and as you see on my title, as human-centered. So it's all about ethics, the philosophy of AI, the importance of the human being in this rapidly advancing technology. And then I do a lot of training for clients, a lot of writing and speaking on this topic. But I always say, more than anything, I'm a father of a 10-year-old, and I'm concerned about his future if we don't get this right. And we have to all work together. Colleen, thank you.
Fantastic. And then I'd also like to introduce Avi, who will be joining as a supporting role for Johan today for contributions to our conversation. So Avi, over to you for an introduction.
Thanks, Colleen. Thanks for having me today. Really excited to be here chatting to you about this very interesting and relevant topic to this day and age. Just some background on myself. So I'm a principal AI specialist at the CSIR, and we work on keeping one foot in the present with implementing some of these cutting edge AI solutions, and also keeping one foot in the future, looking at what we can do to support the country and on their journey to adopt AI into our landscape to grow the South African economy. Looking forward to the conversations today. Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. So as you can see, we have two people presenting today who have knowledge on not just the topic, but also the sector that we are going to chat about today. But that is my cue to step back. I'm going to give over to you, Johan, and we will be making contributions throughout, but over to you, Johan. Looking forward to the session.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you. Just before I change the screen, there's a QR code. Avi, I'm not that advanced yet, but that's looks really good. It's about Avi's work that he does, links to some of the things. So I'm just going to leave it there for a little bit if anyone would like to do a quick QR code scan. Everyone, so the conversation today is really something that we are all grappling with. I don't think there are any absolute experts. It's new and quickly advancing technology. And we definitely also have to have an African and a South African lens on this topic. There's a lot happening globally that we'll chat about, but I also think we need, as I always say, African solutions by Africans for our continent. So we've got a number of slides, and obviously it'll be part of the recording. We're going to use it as a framework. This is not a lecture. So between Avi and myself, we're going to talk through some of the points. And Avi, remember, I can't see anything but my screen, so just interrupt me, please. And also, Colleen, as relevant questions pop up, interrupt me, please. But we'll also try and focus on most of the questions toward the end. So firstly, we're just going to look at what is AI readiness. What is the current state in South Africa and Africa? And here, I'll just want to take you through some of the key things that's been happening over the last while. I also just want to add that I might seem quite critical in that there's not enough happening, because there is not enough happening, but there are some things happening, which I'll also touch on. And, you know, it's easy to sit on the sidelines and criticize government or other entities. I think we all, in one way or another, have something to contribute. We look at some of the challenges and barriers, of which there are many on our continent, but that we can overcome them by working together. Touch briefly on some of the global in particular, but local and global AI regulatory frameworks or the lack thereof. Some of the practical applications, and that's quite important because, I mean, we can have all the laws in the world, but if it doesn't mean anything for us as citizens and for our children in their future, then who cares? We're going to then touch on some of training. Colleen is going to take us through that, some of the CTU training that's really, really good and really worth looking at. And then we'll look at any remaining comments and questions. And again, if you have anything to contribute, because remember, me and Avi, we only know that much. You know, the longer I work in this field, the more I'm confronted with how quickly it's changing and how I need to upskill myself. So we look forward to your positive contributions and to your questions as well. Here's just a high-level view of what's happening in the AI regulatory framework across the world. There's been a lot said about the EU's AI Act, which I think, and then Avi, I don't know if you'll agree, it'll probably become a foundation stone for AI regulation across the world. It's quite Eurocentric, so we need to look at taking the principles of that act, apply it to us in Africa. But that EU AI Act is, and also the one in the US that they're working on, is obviously relevant for us, for organizations dealing with European or American clients. On Africa, there's not all that much. You'll see a little dot there on the side, which is Mauritius. Sadly, South Africa is, from a global and an African point of view, quite far behind when it comes to AI innovation, regulatory frameworks, and the like, but there is some progress. And Avi, on this global view, any comments from your side, things you've seen in the work that you are doing at the CSIR?
So, Johan, I do share sentiments about the EU AI Act. I think the EU has taken a big step forward, and I'm actually involved in some of the International Standards Organization standards development that support some of the EU AI Act. So, from my naive perspective right now, not looking at the final EU AI Act that should be coming out soon, I do think similar to how GDPR was on the privacy side, South Africa should take some lessons from the EU so that we can get it right, especially with our efforts not being that advanced at present.
And I think a challenge is always that fine balance between regulation and innovation. You know, you don't want to stifle innovation, because I also think there's between, especially the large economies of the world, such an arms race to become the top dogs in AI, especially from a military point of view, from a national intelligence point of view, and the like. The other challenge is, how do we actually enforce this regulation? Because even from a privacy regulatory framework point of view, in our country with Papia, you know, we've had some massive data breaches over the last 3 years with TransUnion and Transnet and Dis-Chem and others. It's probably very complex to prosecute it, but I have not seen anything happen from that point of view. So my concern is just, I think we have to work at a good, relevant regulatory framework for Africa and South Africa. How that will be enforced will be interesting. Avi, one of the key features of the EU AI Act that I think is foundational is what they call explainable AI. So when I, for instance, apply for credit with my bank for a home loan, etc., we already see that a lot of banks, even here in South Africa, use automated decisioning systems. Those systems are often quick and often quite accurate, but you know, we're going to talk about the biases in our data sets, especially from an African point of view. But what the EU AI Act says that I like, or the proposed act, is that as a consumer, I need to have the right to contact my bank and ask firstly, did an algorithm make this decision? And explain to me how the algorithm got to that decision and maybe reconsider it from a human point of view. Now, what I just think is, if our banks and our telcos and our insurance companies think they have big contact centers at the moment, I wonder where we're going to get. They'll probably have to triple if every consumer, rightfully, will have to right to question how the AI got to that decision and to possibly reconsider it. I think it's important for us as consumers. How large organizations will deal with it will be quite tricky. So a lot happening. There are some things happening in Africa. It's not always represented on this map. I think a lot of the African companies are, before me, seems to be in early stages of developing policies and regulatory frameworks, which is a good start. But I don't know if there are any African countries in particular that stands out from your experience, Avi.
Yeah, so Johan, just to take a step back to one of your previous points there, I think in terms of explainability, we can't stress enough how important that is in this AI space, especially as things develop. It's very important that if a decision is made that affects your life, you should be able to get an answer on how they came to that decision and what factors affect it. I do agree with you that our financial sector is dabbling with quite a bit of automated decision making. But one of the lucky things for us within our banking sector is that there's strong regulations where decisions like credit specifically are tightly regulated in terms of what information can be used. So in one sense, I do see that our banking sector is actually quite competitive worldwide. So that's a good sign for us. And going into the Africa and South Africa basis on policy, I do think that we have an opportunity as South Africa to set the tone for how the African countries around us should follow suit or should collaborate with us. There's a lot of AI development in the likes of Kenya, Rwanda, South Africa. So leveraging our African contingent and working together can really make a difference.
There's also a lot being done by the African Union, the member states. And I think there the question is to what extent do we need a one continent, one size fits all enforceable framework? And to what extent do you give the different geographical sovereign nations an opportunity to adapt to their own specific situation? So I think from an EU point of view, there's still a lot of conversations that need to be had there. But I do think if we can have an African-wide framework that suits all of our citizens, especially from an ethnicity, from a gender difference point of view, language in particular, I don't know if people know this, we've got about 3,000 languages and dialects on the African continent. Most of our platforms that we use are not suitable to a lot of these languages. In fact, these languages are highly or underrepresented. And luckily, there's a lot happening. Organizations like Lalapa AI and others, I'm sure you know about them, are doing a lot to create data sets for African language, African imagery for medical research and the like. But yes, there's a heck of a lot to do. What I want to do briefly.
Johan,
go on.
Before you move on there, I'm glad you bring up the topic of language, because one thing that Africa has suffered from in the past is the global, let's call it the global north. They don't take into consideration the diversity of the problems and the complexity of the African continent. And organizations like Lelapa and other AI startups, as well as the CSIR, who works quite a lot in bridging those language barriers in our country, primarily what we need to do is get technology to people in their language of choice so that it's something that they can easily adopt and adapt to. And one of the big challenges in our country and our continent is we have so much of diversity, but technology favors more of an English-centric approach. So it's for the African innovators on the continent to get behind building technologies for African problems, bridging language barriers, and just the very unique nuances that we find in our country that nobody else in other parts of the world can really relate to.
Oh, yeah, I just want to go back to the previous slide, and because this is such an important topic, and it's about us, because they talk about digital sovereignty or sovereignty. Yes, we have to rely on the innovation of countries like China and the US and Europe and others, but we can't just, from a blanket point of view, just implement it. We need to look at to what extent will it serve our population. Now, the story I love telling, I'm just going to be brief, and I might have, Caroline, spoken about this on some of our previous events. A real eureka moment for me was about a year ago. My son, he's now 10, he's adopted, so he's African. I was helping him to do a school assignment, and the title was, "Are Robots Our Friends?" And he sat next to me, we were busy on my laptop, and now we're Googling images of robots and AI, etc., to really make his assignment look cool. And he said something that I never thought about before. He said, "Daddy, why do these robots all look like you and not like me?" And that really kind of spurred me on to research this topic. I've done some work with Cambridge University on this as well, this underrepresentation of our ethnic and gender diversity in the data sets. So, only about 3% of young people in Africa who enter the field of data science and AI, only 3% are female. Because again, the narrative we see is that it's a man's world and it's a Caucasian man's world. And even that representation, that narrative, coinciding with this language thing that we're speaking about, Avi, we need to recreate it. AI is for all of us. It is for Africa. But again, we are bombarded with this Northern Hemisphere, Eurocentric kind of view. So from a philosophical, ethical, educational point of view, so much to do, and a lot of people are busy with it. Before I move on, any comments on that, Avi, from your side?
Yeah, and that's a very very important point you raised there. And like if you look at the movie industry, how big of a difference representation makes with that field within the AI and data science space, we need to encourage people within our country because we have some world-class institutions and universities that train some of the best people in the world. But the challenge is the job market for the AI space within South Africa is a bit limited right now. So our talent is getting exported outside of the country because we don't have the opportunities for them. So we need to develop the appetite to pursue some of these solutions, keep our talent in South Africa, and grow to solve the African problems as well.
This is like a series of webinars on its own, just this specific topic.
I was thinking the same, that this, because we even have a statement here, Johan and Avi, if I can maybe read it, because I think it's relevant to your discussion, is Lizette also commented that she cannot see how global acts can be enforced at this point because this is like a nuclear development. AI just, went boom everywhere and everyone wants to be ahead. So, I mean, yeah, that to me was an interesting statement as well.
It's such an important point because here's my concern. Those who create these policies will do it obviously to benefit themselves, these regional areas, these countries. So can China or Europe or the US enforce AI laws on Africa? I think to some extent from a commerce point of view, if we deal with American banks, for instance, but they're going to do it in a way that fits them and that they will benefit from. And so that enforceability is going to be quite interesting. But again, back to the point, we need to create something that will work for us in this continent. We're going to have to keep on grappling with this. It's moving super quickly. This technology is becoming so fast at our way. We're going to start looking at quantum computing this year, I believe, the most powerful computers that's ever been created. Deep fakes, misrepresentation, the so-called post-truth era, potential loss of privacy. So I know it sounds like a bit of a dystopian doomsday world. We know there are many, many potential benefits, but my fear, Colleen, is just that our children will say we were caught asleep at the wheel. We didn't do enough, So
yeah, on that point there, I think AI is like a knife. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. So it's within our power right now, like you say, to create a safe future. So I think ourselves, even the audience on the call, we need to play our part so that we gain the benefits of this technology, but we're also aware of the risks and we know where to draw the line and to protect people of South Africa. And to answer the question more directly in terms of the legislation, I don't think that the EU AI Act can be enforced within the boundaries of South Africa. But what we can do is take learnings from what they've spent time defining, getting wrong, redefining. So take their learnings so that we don't make the same mistakes. And we build upon that, similar to what we did with Poppy, which is is based primarily of principles in GDPR. And we've learned from that. So if we can follow a similar approach and then adapt it to our African market, the challenge where the EU AI Act and the likes will come in is if you as a company or you as an organization within South Africa is trying to do business internationally, you would need to abide to international laws. So if we're looking at exporting our solutions and abiding to how the international market wants to play, you would have to abide to EU standards if you're going into the EU market, US standards if you're going to the US market, just like how they would have to abide to South African standards if they're coming into our market.
Absolutely. Well, what I want to do next is just go through some of the key highlights of what's busy happening in our geography. And again, that balance between government that needs to regulate it, a lot of people in government, not all, but a lot, not really understanding this technology. I think there's needs a lot more industry involvement, and there are some positive signs. We definitely need a lot more academic and university involvement. I think the trick for me is just this is moving so fast, and we know that laws and regulations take time. But I almost wonder if that split between where this technology is going and how quickly we can enforce regulation is just becoming wider and wider. That at some point we get to a point where it's not even worth looking at it. I don't know. But let me just quickly take you through some of the highlights. Now, I think most of us on this webinar are aware of this report from October 2020. The Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It was a brilliant report. It was led by Prof. Tsalisi Mawala, who was, I think, at UJ then. He's at the UN now, if I'm not mistaken. Here are just some of the summarized recommendations. A great report. And then nothing happened for a few years. Now, some of the things we see on here, there's grapplings that is happening for our infrastructure, policy and legislation. There's some initial things there. But now remember, this is now July 2024. And there was a lot of criticism. Even the late Prof. Dwalski at WITS co-wrote this piece about how large this gap is between what was recommended to the president and the realities in our country. And again, it's not a criticism. We need to start somewhere. But my worry, Avi, is just that these things happen almost in drips and drabs, and then a few months and years go past. I mean, I often say we're not even in the fourth industrial revolution. The production of electricity was a second industrial revolution. Proper rail networks, a second industrial revolution issue. So we are, from a infrastructure point of view, a national policy, and a lot of the infrastructure in this country so far behind. If we can leapfrog, it will be great. And again, back to that collaborative approach of all of us. I'm just going to move on, but Avi, again, I can't see. You must just interrupt me if you've got comments on any of these.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here then, Jan.
Okay.
I think you raise an important point there. Implementation in our country is relatively slow, and it's because there's not, let's say, intentful investment into science, R&D, AI, and these technologies as there should be. So because we live in the socioeconomic climate that we live in, the balance between where funds can get invested obviously becomes a challenge. So how do we as a country invest in the future when the present still needs a lot of investment to get us up to speed? So I was actually part of one of the 4IR centers at CSIR for the last few years. And the thing is, there's so much of science that needs to happen, but there's not enough funds available for this to happen within South Africa. If you compare it to the likes of the EU, the US, China, where they have solid R&D investment strategies, that's where South Africa is falling a bit behind. And it becomes a bit of a challenge for us as a country to make these leapfrogs that we wish to make if there's no backing behind the implementation. We need to have a solid plan of where we're going, and it needs to be defined by private industry in collaboration with government, because we can't solve the problems of the country just from one sector. It needs to be a collaborative effort across the board so that everybody does their part and we push our country forward.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of glad I'm not in government to have to figure this out, but people like you and I, Avi, and many of us in this webinar need to contribute. I think they're open to listen. I mean, and I'm going to show it in some of my next slides. Again, I just hope while sorting out our very real, especially historical societal issues, that there's still elements of real progress into the future. October last year, we saw the draft National AI Plan being published. Again, a lot of criticism about it. It's again a step in the right direction. What I wanted to ask you, Avi, and I'll show it on the next slide as well. Here's my concern. We have some of our top universities involved in these initiatives, as they should be, especially from an R&D point of view. My worry is, and I've already seen signs of it, that it's a bit of a land grab. There's a bit of a fight between some of the universities about who's going to be the top dog in these initiatives. And it seems that the desired output is academic publications, which is relevant, but that's not going to solve the problem for the little kid running around in Soweto with no technological future. Are you seeing that too? That is my assessment right, or what do you think?
So yeah, in the let's call it the science and research sector, there is somewhat of a shift in some senses. So universities traditionally would do, let's call it type A research, where it's academic publication based. And then you'll get some of the research councils like the CSIR, the HSRC, and a few others, where the objective is to take the science to the people. And whilst sometimes it might seem like practical implementation of scientific innovations are but slow, I think the challenge is more on the marketing aspect. It's not publicized enough on the wins. There's a lot more focus on the problem. And I think as a country, if we can shift our focus sometimes to what we're actually doing right and what we're capable of doing, it might benefit us a bit where, yes, we have a lot of problems, but let's also celebrate some of the wins as well. There's quite a lot happening, and while I share your sentiment that within the universities, there's always going to be competition for who's better. In any thriving and developing industry or space, if you look at football, for example, you need competition in your team in order for you to succeed. So I actually see the competition between universities to uncover the next greatest gem actually a good sign. The problem is we need to be able to take this and get it to the people faster. And that's where we struggle a bit, and we need to do better on that, as well as visibility and marketing.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we almost never hear technological AI success stories, and there are many. We have some of the best startups in the world working in this space. They're struggling with scaling and funding and the like, many of them. But I wonder if you remember there was, I don't even know if it's active anymore, that was that South African Good News website that would publish obviously all the good news. Now, what if we can get a technological good news platform of sorts where we can start bragging and telling some of these stories, a way of really spreading the news? Because, I mean, I work in this field and I collaborate with many of the people. I myself am not aware of all the good stuff or even many of the good stuff happening. So maybe that's a good afterthought that we can chat about afterwards. April this year, we had the National AI Government Summit. It was hosted at the Johannesburg Business School. The then Minister of Communications and Digital Technology spoke there. There's obviously now been a cabinet reshuffle. We now have Solly Molatsi from the DA as the new minister. Hopefully he and his team can build on what the previous minister and his team did. I was actually quite surprised. I don't know if you were at this event, Avi?
No, I actually wasn't. Okay. I'm keen to pick your brain on what transpired there afterwards.
Sure. Look, so firstly, the minister really was amazing. I thought it was going to be another typical government official, boring, whatever. He spoke so well, and he touched on so many of the key things we're speaking about today. So that gave me a lot of confidence that they are, as a department, going into the right direction. People were critical about this, including me. I wrote a piece for Business Day on it. It was, and again, it's a start, but it was very vague. very academically written, in my view. After reading that document, I can't remember, it's probably about 48 pages. And maybe it's just because I'm a bit stupid, but I was still not sure what exactly they're trying to do here, what they're trying to say. It's a start. We need to build on it now. But hopefully, between us and government, we don't feel that this is sufficient and that we can kind of now relax, and hopefully the wheels of the train will be moving forward. The last one I want to show you before we get to
So yeah, and
yeah.
on this one, before you move on,
Mm.
I think you raise a valuable point there. The academic sector cannot be the sole provider to defining these kinds of things. It needs to be accessible and understandable to everyday South Africans, and industry industry needs to play their part in these kinds of definitions, because even if companies are not ready for this just yet, if they do not provide input or talk to what their challenges and needs are and contribute to definitions like this, then this is always going to seem like something that's out of reach, because the way it's communicated and developed is at a technical level that's not accessible to people.
True. And just you've made me think of something else now. When I advise my clients on implementing AI, I always encourage them to have a small core team, but a diverse team. Because often it's pretty much the technologists, and we need them. But we need our HR execs involved, our legal execs, organizational design people, and others. And we definitely need diversity, so that we don't build solutions that only suits a subsection of our customer base, as an example. And one of the things I'm really hoping for, Avi, is that, yeah, on the one hand, we need a much more strong involvement from technologists in our market, but we need the human sciences. We need the philosophers, the ethicists, the legal experts, and just run-of-the-mill South Africans, mothers and fathers, to some extent involved in this. So, maybe just building on what you've just said, because this ship cannot be sailing down this river and none of us know about it, or there's no room for us on it. And hopefully with that larger collaborative effort, we will make sure not to just copy and paste what the EU is doing, because it must suit that kid in the rural area. I always say that. As if he or she in time does not see an impact on their lives, we can have AI conversations till the clouds fall down. It has to become practical and applicable and to the benefit of everyone in our society.
So, and on that point, which is such a valuable note that you put in there, the thing we need to do is, we don't need to do AI for the sake of doing AI. If you see the next greatest solution coming out on the internet from, say, OpenAI or one of these companies, that may not be what your company needs or what your team needs. You need to look at it from a value-driven perspective. What problem do I have, and what value am I adding by doing something AI related? If you don't think of it from that perspective, we're just going to be doing it for the sake of it. A lot of the solutions out there right now focus on Western problems, and we can customize it and localize it to our problems as well. But we need to, if we want to leapfrog, we need to think of things from the perspective of, where's the biggest problems in our country, and what can we do to kind of solve that? And I see one of the comments in the chat about experimentation and exploring within specific guardrails. I think that's very important. There needs to be exploration, because you're not going to define or uncover something new or cutting edge if you play within a safe space. You need to have that room to test the bounds and things outside the box as well.
Absolutely. Then just before we get to the slides, just on that, I know Colleen loves it when I say this. She always makes a comment. I tell my clients, if you're not using Excel properly at the moment, don't even look at AI. And I know, Colleen, you're going to touch on some of the Microsoft tools later. Don't start with AI and solve problems. It's possibly not even needed for whatever the business or societal problem that you need to fix. Okay, lastly, quickly, and this is more exciting for me because it's busy maturing. I don't know if you're involved with this, Avi. I think you might be with this working group that's happening at the moment. I know some of your colleagues are.
Yeah, so another area of CSR is spearheading this, so we'll get involved probably at a later stage. I think it's just kicking off at the moment.
Okay, super. This is very encouraging for me. I am involved in this as well. In fact, we have our next session is on Monday at the CSIR, and we are on different work streams. I'm leading the work stream on the future of work, and I've got a number of fantastic colleagues from different backgrounds and domains bringing in recommendations. And on Monday, we need to now, and we only have 15 minutes for all of our work streams to bring back our SWOT analyses on where we are, South Africa, when it comes to, in my case now, in my group's case, the future of work. And the idea of this is that it will form a recommendation framework for the president and the cabinet. And I think the target date to have this done by, if I'm not mistaken, is by September. But hopefully this will lead to some real tangible recommendations that can be implemented. Still in its early days. The one thing that encouraged me is I think there's about 83 people involved. A lot of them are from industry. A lot of them are from academia. A lot of them are from government-related organizations. But I've just seen in the group I'm working in the variety of views and voices that are so relevant. So this, for me personally, is very encouraging. Hopefully, we can just pull this through now and get government to start using some of these recommendations and others to actually make an impact. Avi, any comments? And then in the 20 minutes we've got left, we'll go through some of the slides quickly. Can I move on or anything from you?
Yeah, and I think there's just questions in the chat about how to become part of the working group. I think for now that working group, I think it's a closed set of people, as far as I understand, because right now they're trying to get the initial guidelines, and I think once that is in place and it's out for comments, then they might expand that further. But I don't think it's open to new additions, at least in the next 6 months or so, because I'm not directly involved in it because I'm going to most likely be involved in the next cycle. So I think once that's open, perhaps via some forum we can share where that's open, and if people want to be involved, they can get involved in that as well.
Yeah, you are right. They want to keep it to the audience that it is now, but they're going to take these base recommendations and then increase it to further sub areas. And I think there will be a lot of involvement in these different work streams. So I think, look, whether it's in the chat that I can't see or whether it's just me or Colleen or Avi, definitely we need people to be involved as we progress this. So just drop us a note or a mail. I've got a little sheet where, because I've had a number of people ask for the same, where I just make sure I've got their names. And when we get to that point, let's pull in the larger audience that we can pull you in. What I want to do with the next slides, and again, this recording will be available. I'm not necessarily going to go through every point from a time point of view, but I think what I'd rather suggest, Avi, is that we just talk about the main themes of each slide. I think there's about 6 or 7 left, and then we've got about 25 or so, 30 minutes left for conversations, comments, and questions. And I sometimes think that, when I attend webinars or lectures, it's the conversation afterward that's often for me more valuable than the actual presentation. So that's why I'm quite keen to get to it. Again, I'm going to just bring this up and we can talk through it. And again, people can make comments and ask questions.
Johan, if I can just add, and sorry to interrupt you, it's just to address the audience quick. I just want to say, for those who've been contributing to the chat, thank you very much. It's really wonderful to see your engagement. And we are trying our best not to, take up too much of the time of the session, because I'm sure everyone has other responsibilities as well. But we will, as Johan mentioned, leave some time at the end to review some of the questions that can contribute greatly to discussion. And I think I can already tell just from the engagement that we will need to set up a part 2 webinar to continue the conversation, because I think there's quite a lot of interest here. So I just want to say again, thank you to everyone's contributions. We're definitely not ignoring you. It is purely just for the sake of our time and the content that still needs to be presented. But please keep sharing your comments.
Cool. And then, Colleen, just to your point, look, this is such an important and big topic. We are not even scratching the surface today. But if it can give people insights, if it can also trigger thinking, even if it is, I want to get involved, how can I get involved? It is already a good start. So this first slide, and again, Avi, let's move through them quite quickly. AI readiness is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. Okay, now we are AI ready, our infrastructure is sorted, we've got a regulatory framework, but what then? And I think that's a key thing for me in this conversation. It is, we are doing it in order to, and that order to is about the future of our country, our global competitiveness, our education level of our children, the security of us as a nation, and the like. And that's also the same for organizations looking at their own AI readiness. It must be a means to an end and not just an end in itself. Avi?
Yeah, I think you captured it perfectly on this slide, Jan. We need to be thoughtful in our AI readiness and make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, and it must be a South African related AI readiness. And I think we've touched on that point already. Some of this we've already spoken about. Look, let me go back. There are initiatives. It's not like we're nowhere. I just personally think we're not moving fast enough, but at least we are moving. The key players we spoke about, startups, tech companies, government, academia, and the like, the investments in AI technology. You've also touched on that, Avi. I think my view is that even if you look at the likes of UNICEF, the UN, and obviously your larger companies like your Microsofts, AWS, and others, there's a lot of investment taking place in our continent. I think sometimes they're struggling to find the right worthwhile kind of initiatives in order to invest those millions of dollars. There are success stories. There are a lot of setbacks, but things are happening. And collaboration is maybe the one word that pops out from all of these slides from here, Avi.
Yeah, and for myself as well, Jan, I think we can't get to these massive solutions on our own. We need to lean on each other and collaboratively get there. There's no point in trying to get 100% of the pie when it comes to the benefit. It's better to get 5% of a bigger pie than 100% of a small one. So collaborating and building bigger and better solutions, it benefits the country and also benefits the individuals that get involved in these initiatives from their different organizations.
That second point talks about the ecosystem. Something I've seen is that there are a lot of phenomenal initiatives from startups, certain universities, and the like. A lot of them have been happening in isolation, almost recreating the wheel. So I think hopefully through some of these initiatives, we will get the combined goodwill, brain power, ideas of these different aspects of this loose ecosystem together to start working together. Again, we've loosely touched on some of these things already. Our societal problems, our infrastructure limitations, our electricity problems, a huge, huge issue when it comes to this topic. I think we probably, in my view, from a global point of view, but definitely in South Africa, need to rethink education to a massive scale. We are creating, I always say that it seems to me that our education system globally is based on the first industrial revolution, creating factory workers who can do repetitive jobs. I often say, why do we need, in the information age, why do we need to teach people things that they can Google? Why do we need to remember dates and facts when we're not teaching students to understand and apply? Data privacy will become a bigger problem as this technology increases in its power, I think. And then that last one, also the cultural, institutional resistance, maybe to one of our earlier points, the fact that it's not representative to us as a people in Africa. This is a slide for a long talk, but any key comments on this, Avi?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you point out here is the education side of things. And whilst AI can have some risks to the quality of education, if it's done in a thoughtful and intentful way, we can use these tools to educate people on complex topics in much more easier ways without needing too big of an investment. Reusable stuff that can be used for generations, but done in a way where it's validated, it's proper, and you are being thoughtful about what you're educating people on. Because I do agree with you, our education system is preparing our country for basically an old day and age that doesn't exist anymore. We need to propel into the technological age and take our learners with us.
If we think of the kind of jobs that can be automated, most of the skills we are producing are very automatable kind of skills. And it's a big philosophical question, the skills of tomorrow and the like. Yet again, a separate session. But for me, if we can generate and produce young people who can think critically, who obviously have the opportunities to do so, who can think for themselves and create solutions rather than just repeat what the textbook says. We talk a lot these days about hyper-personalized learning. Not changing the curriculum necessarily, but changing the delivery method that suits that individual. I think this one size fits all. I mean, it didn't work for me. I don't think it worked for anyone in this meeting today, but a lot to be done from an upskilling point of view. Just a few points. I mean, there are already some regulatory frameworks in our country and in Africa that are, to one extent or another, applicable to AI and the future of AI. I think another part of this AI strategy for our country, and especially our regulatory framework, is to take the best of these, and there are many others I can list, and for it to work together in an ecosystem of laws that are not prohibiting innovation, but do protect our citizenry. International, we've kind of touched on already, looking at leveraging of these international endeavors to legislate this technology, but we cannot one size fits it all to just our region. We also had the cloud policy come out recently. There's some very interesting, it's not legislation as far as I know, Avi, but there are also some interesting things, especially around foreign ownership and foreign jurisdiction on our data. Popia covers that, but I think we need a lot more stringent measures on that.
Yeah, Johan, and I think legislation is always going to be following behind technological advancements. And whilst legislation catches up, we need to have certain guidelines in place where it's communities of practice agree to certain principles, because legislation takes a while, and if we don't have these principles in place, people can play in, I would call it, gray areas until these legislations are defined, and sometimes that can be very risky. So it's very important to think about the risks of what you're doing when you're playing around with AI, because there are risks and you could cause harm. So you need to think about that when you're working with these things whilst regulation catches up.
You think you contact a call center, if we think of conversational AI, large language models, there are already, even in our country, some of our banks using human-sounding AI platforms and you think you're speaking to a human. Avi, I've actually seen these platforms are so powerful that they mimic the nuances around the chat, depending on your tone of voice, potentially your gender, your age, where it'll and and maybe giggle at some of the things you say, but you don't know you're speaking to a non-human entity. And I'm wondering there if at the start of the call, because ethically they should tell me you are about to speak to an AI. Are you okay with it? If not, press hash. Right now, there's no framework for them to have to do that.
So Johan, on that, I'm gonna be devil's advocate here. Okay. So I worked in that space within Vodacom, and even the technologies we build at CSIR, it's on the synthetic voices, but it's more about representation. So we do it from the perspective of providing these kinds of Google and Siri kind level voices for our South African languages, so that our people can participate in their languages of choices. And when it comes down to these automated voices, the thing is, companies are struggling right now, and some of these automated techniques provide the innovation so that mundane requests that don't really require human intervention can be addressed by automated systems. I do think that putting in a note to say that this is an AI voice or an AI chatbot would be a nice touch, but my personal opinion is right now the quality is not at the point where it's completely indistinguishable from a human. You will get those robotic elements that come in, but I think with guidelines coming in, that would be an interesting thing. But that type of technology, I think I don't think it's going to go anywhere soon, and I think it's going to really provide an improvement to customer service offerings in the future, because agents and humans involved within these environments can focus on the complex stuff where you're getting more human interaction. You need the human element because there's a lot of things that AI can't do, and that's where the human side of things is going to reap the benefits.
Maybe to that point, because it is relevant. I mean, the business case there is potentially using less people, using tech to answer questions quicker. Now, for me, the kind of the run-of-the-mill questions: when will I receive my account? Did you receive my payment? When is my product going to be delivered? Personally, I'm happy to chat to a chatbot or then a human-sounding AI. But when it comes to, I'm worried about my finances, or I might think my child is developing cancer or something like that, that's then where that human touch comes in. So maybe in using that example is give me what are the typical symptoms of cancer in children? I mean, that a bot can read to me, but I really need some advice as a parent living in X area, that empathy, etc. So maybe that heavy lifting, it's okay if the AI does it, but that real personal touch is hopefully.
Yeah, so on that, I share a sentiment there, Johan. And the important thing to take note of there, empathy was listed as one of the future skills that humans would need to focus on in the 4IR Society 5.0, whichever framework you want to look at. Empathy and some of the more softer skills that are uniquely human. Robots struggle with that. You will not find, as much as AI solutions can try to empathize, there's almost an intuitive feeling as a human where you can detect where empathy is real and empathy is fake. And for those elements, that's where the human part is very important. So not dealing with the mundane queries where you don't really have to use your brain to solve these things. It's just transactional. That is for AI. Transactional things are for AI, and things where it requires a bit of complexity, it requires a bit of adaptability. That's where humans come in. I did see a comment about humans struggle with empathy coming in, and that is 100% true. But we are better at learning those intuitive science than robots are, because those are things that you can't really explain in an instruction. It's something that you feel and experience.
Yeah, we don't even know why we feel it. It's just instinct or a result of evolution. But you're so right. Always done with some of these key points, Colleen, before I hand over to you. But let's just quickly look at some of the practical application. Again, let's not AI for the sake of AIing it. If government can use this to offer us better services, better planning from an electricity grid point of view. If we think of the unemployment fund, that if you deal with them, you probably have torn all the remaining hair out of your head by now. In my experience and people I know, it's from a technological point of view, it's shocking. It serves millions of people in our country. If we think of social grants, back to the education conversation. So, and then here, just before I ask you for your comments, Avi, this transparency and accountability, if we think of things like blockchain potentially in government procurement, that's really transparent. That's, if we can pull this off, it will really, really help us in our economy and in our country. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I do agree with you. Yeah, and I think when we speak about practical applications, it needs to be focused on what value we are getting out of it. That's what makes it practical. And we can, you'll see big plans being put out where there's a vision for a future that could be achieved, but there's so many different factors at play that influence that future, that if you focus on small marginal gains that we can achieve as a country in public sector, for example. So take, for example, your department. You have a problem, like Johan mentioned earlier. If you don't have the skills in something as simple as Excel, how do you go about saying I want an AI-driven solution here? You need the basic foundational building blocks, and to the theme of Microsoft that Colleen's going to speak to a bit later, the likes of their Excel solutions, their Azure solutions. We use Azure quite a bit. It makes it user friendly for you to take that next step forward on your journey without having to have that steep learning curve. And personal experience with this, it has been very beneficial. Some of the trainings that exist and are on offer in this space.
Yeah. Just some of the people I've been speaking with in government, they're looking at predicting natural disasters more accurately. That definitely serves us as a nation. Obviously, planning around roads and transportation, planning about large-scale unrest, depending on sentiments being expressed on social media, text messages, WhatsApp, and the like. Foreign country involvement, spies, and so forth, money laundering, and so forth. The use cases there to use this predictive abilities of AI to protect our economy and our citizenry there are so many potential use cases. Caroline, I'm super keen to see the chat, but I think it's important that people might say, okay, great, but what now? What do we do next? So I'm going to hand over to you. I'm going to stop sharing if that's okay, but the floor is yours.
Yes, and I'll be quick because I think both of you covered it quite well. I think what's important to note is, and Johan, you've touched on this in a previous webinar, when the internet was introduced back in, late 80s, early 90s, more globally, people had the same fears, or there were the same comments about, things taking over the world and children that are going to become, if for lack of a better word, stupid because they're using a tool to do the work for them. And the same movement is happening now with AI. And the truth is, it's still going to be a while before, when I say a while, it's going to take a long time before AI even remotely has a chance of taking over things. But while it is progressing, we should be progressing with it. And that's where that conversation about Excel comes in. Personally, I've seen many people who started to use tools like ChatGPT or even Copilot struggle just because they don't have the foundational usage of data. And that's what it's all about. AI is a collection of data that's supporting your inputs and your prompts. And if you don't know how to work with data, you're not going to know how to ask for certain things in the right way. And that's where the starting point of Excel training can come in, which is obviously offered by Microsoft. Excel's been around for I think some of us even were born with Excel already in existence. And I saw an Excel ad, a TV ad that came out from the 90s, and not much of Excel has changed. It's pretty much still the same tool, but it is powerful, and it has taught us to automate. It's actually taught us to automate data. And now we can use ChatGPT as an example, a large language model as a supportive tool. So my opinion is, and I think this is yours as well, is to start at a foundational level, learn how to use basic things like Microsoft Office tools, know how to use Teams, know how to use Excel, know how to use Word, know how to use PowerPoint, because you cannot ask your AI to assist you if you can't even do the foundations yourself. So that's, to me, that's a swim. What's that term? Learn how to swim before you surf. It comes down to that foundation. And then to touch on what Alvi mentioned is, once you do get to that level where you've got the foundation set, let's say you are an Excel buff and you know how to use this already. The next step is implementing technology within the business, such as Microsoft Azure, to utilize in the business and to incorporate AI in a more network framework. And that's where fundamental training can be started on Microsoft Azure. And the next phase could be Microsoft Copilot, all of which are courses that CTU has on offer. Again, for those who are engaged with CTU, you can visit our website to see the range of Microsoft courses that we have available. And what I'm excited to mention here, and I think the audience here is one of the first to learn about this, is in collaboration with you, Johan, we are going to be launching the AI Academy very soon, which is a collection of courses based on fundamental AI training. So we're quite excited about that. We will definitely keep the audience informed on this progression when it comes to training available. And I think just to wrap up, I think change starts in small increments. It's difficult to force change in a macro space, especially if you think of countrywide changes. It starts with the influence. Change is normally influenced by environment, it's influenced by need, and it's influenced by market. And we represent market. We as businesses or individuals can drive change if we implement it within our own spaces and within our own businesses, slowly but surely spreading that out into more of a national and global change. So I think that's what we also want to encourage here is, yes, we can't be part of all the work groups and we can't influence all the decision makers who sit at the top seats, but we can be part of the small changes that influence that in the long run. And it starts with educating yourself and educating your teams. So that's what I'll say on that point. And please, you're welcome to contribute to that before we go into the questions.
That just, Khalid, you're right. What's that story of the starfish on the beach and the kid was throwing back one at a time. And he said, for that one it counts, for that one it counts. Now, especially if you're a parent, but any member of society, we in our big or small ways have a role to play when it comes to our future. And I think people might be surprised that they start reaching out to some of these initiatives, that there is room for a lot of people from different spheres to be involved. So I agree with you.
Awesome. Okay, so I think what we can do next, Johan, both Avi and I have had the privilege to see the questions as they came in. So Avi, welcome to just track some questions you feel are important if I miss any of them. But the first one I think that I'd like to bring up is Sunette. Sunette Kok is asking, in your opinion, which government department should spearhead AI legislation?
So I can jump in on that one. I think right now, I think it's focused on the Department of Science, primarily spearheading it because they have the orchestration between the different entities on the scientific side that can inform it, as well as the links to industry via like initiatives like the NACI working group and the likes. So I think right now that is well placed. It's just it needs more momentum, it needs more investment and the likes to push those kinds of things forward.
Fantastic. I see quite a few people kept referring back to the working group. They might have missed the comments that were made earlier. So obviously there's a couple of people asking how they can become part of it or how they can read updates about it. Perhaps if you can, I know it's a repeat, but maybe just answer on that again.
Yeah, so if I can do that. Look, I think so currently there's a core group that's working on some of the recommendations. It's somewhat early days. It seems to me that they will increase the amount of people involved in the different work streams in the next few weeks or months. So I'm happy if people want to just drop me an email or for you, Colleen, or whatever's best, because I've got a list of people I know who said they want to be involved as soon as it increases in scope. And I'm glad to take your contact details added to that list and keep you posted, because we do need, especially from a diverse skill set expertise point of view, more and more people. I don't know, Colleen, I mean, I can put my email in the chat. People can just reach out to me directly, and happy to hear from you. Okay, let me just see if I can. Okay, here we go. I'm going to just type it in here.
Yeah, we do have a couple of statements. I'm not sure, Avi, if there were any statements that you feel can raise discussion. Obviously, we have some questions, but we have quite a lot of statements. I'm just going to see.
Yeah, so there's one that came out for me where somebody was saying that they're a 57-year-old knowledge specialist and it's an uphill battle. So I would suggest, yeah, it's overwhelming for us as people that work directly in this field with the amount of things that are coming out. I think focus on a specific area that you can actually keep track of and pay attention to instead of looking at everything. Because if you look at everything, you're going to get overwhelmed. You're going to feel like you can't keep pace. find an area of interest that resonates with you if you want to be keeping abreast in this field. And also for those that are implementing solutions or wanting to take that journey of adding things to their technology roadmap. Us at the CSIR, we also work a lot with SMMEs and public sector to hold their hands on this journey and help them implement small steps within their environment. So that's also an option. If you guys are looking at that, please do get in touch. I think we can help out there as well.
If I may, Colleen, Lizette, the one thing that you have that the youngsters of today don't have is a lifetime of experience and business experience. So I would say it's not the youngsters, the Gen Zs or whatever. Yes, they grow up with this tech, we didn't. But you can never replace the wealth of experience that you have with AI. They're finding that balance between staying up to date with the technology, but you can't out-automate your insights and your business experience with technology. I think so. It's a positive thing that we are a bit older than these youngsters who know how to chat GPT, but they can't even clean their noses properly yet.
That's true. I'm going to raise one of the questions, which is from Timothy. So Timothy asks, can lawmakers keep pace with the rapid advancements in AI when it comes to regulating it, especially considering the often slow bureaucratic processes of our government? Would premature regulations stifle AI advancements?
I'll start, Avi, but yeah, look, I think they're challenged with it. It's moving slowly. Their understanding is limited. We've seen this in the US, we've seen this in the EU, despite the progress luckily they've been making. Look, why do we have seatbelts in our cars? Because when cars started coming out and people started dying because their faces hit the steering wheel, we realized we needed seatbelts. Often we have great leaps in regulation when something really bad happens. But we're now at the most powerful technology we've ever created, really increasing in its power. So what bad must happen before all the countries wake up? And is that too late? I think we should encourage and work with these lawmakers. My personal view, I think that ship has sailed and we are going to continually be behind in from a regulatory framework. I don't know, Avi, hopefully you don't want to cut your wrists. I don't know whether they share my sentiment.
No, I agree with you. I think we need to, when we look at the race for who's leading and the likes, we need to not compete with countries that have different challenges to us. I think within the African context, South Africa can be a leader. And we need to focus on that, because if you look at the US is a collection of states, the EU is a collection of countries. The collective allows you to deliver better value. So we can compete if we collaborate first, I think.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got this question within the Q&A section. I just want to give credit to the name. So this is from August. I'm just going to quickly paste it into the actual chat so that everyone can see it. So August says, there have always been biases in the machine. Seemingly random segments of code can combine to form unintended biases. Unanticipated, these embedded prejudices raise questions about fairness, objectivity, and the ethical implications of artificial intelligence. How can we differentiate between objective algorithms and those that perpetuate human biases?
That's a whole webinar by itself, but very, very relevant. Avi, you want to maybe start, and I'm happy to contribute, but it's super, super relevant.
Yeah, I think we need to evaluate the risks of different applications, and where it's a high impact risk, like say something like a credit decision or insurance for that matter, we need to be mindful of understanding the biases that exist within some of these techniques and the data that we use, and try and adjust and eradicate that for our market. And if there is these biases that exist, we need to be able to explain how we get to decisions so that people can understand what's happening there.
Yeah, look, we will never be bias free as humans or the algorithms, but we need to keep on doing as much we can to make sure that we diminish the amount of biases. I think a safe way of doing that is to constantly test your algorithm and its decision making with different people, whether it's just volunteers in your organization, with different clients. Are the decisions different between different genders, different ethnicities, different age groups, and so forth. And why are there differences? So keep on testing and growing that data set. It'll never be bias free, as I said, but we can really minimize it. And it's important that because I think, Colleen, I've seen clients, they implement this tech with a data set and yippee-do-doo, there the algorithm goes. No constant testing and refining, which is very important.
Yippee-do for sure. I'm also going to share a comment from Ina, who's also made a statement here. So problem with government is that issue of jobs is complex. Unions resist AI integration if job losses are possible, and especially if you think in the context of our country. They are not able to retrain or upskill members, but will expect that of the employer. So integrating AI for efficiency, but not cutting jobs, which is inevitable, is a major question. That's a very, very, I think, important statement.
Look, something I've been thinking about is, do we need something akin to BEE regulation when it comes to automation? In other words, in the banking space, they're not allowed to out-automate more than 10% of the jobs, as an example. But the total other side of the coin there is competitiveness and shareholders and costs. I don't know if we can regulate this. Obviously, we've got our legal frameworks around labor law and the like. We should think about this. I don't know, Avi, if you have any insights. And again, we're already so far behind from a global competitive point of view. Do we want to diminish it even more by stopping automation? I don't know.
So Jan, I always like to draw a comparison here to, at some point in time when automobiles became a thing, there were a lot of horse salesmen, and the whole entire horse industry collapsed in that moment in time. But people had to get reskilled, and as a human race, we are very resilient to adapting to change and to our environment. So just like we've done in the past when cars became a thing, I think technology innovation will push people into other areas that may be more beneficial to their lives, because a lot of AI related solutions are meant to replace the mundane and the repetitive work so that humans can focus on more complex things. So I think there'll be more opportunities rather than job losses, widespread job losses. I think people will be reskilled and redeployed to other areas where they can gain more value out of their roles if their roles become redundant because of automation and AI.
Yeah, and if I can contribute to that, I think the word that keeps coming up is upskilling and reskilling. And that's also what happened when any major, like you mentioned, industrial revolution came in, is the upskilling and training of people, and also the people who put fear aside and take a change head on, because I think that's one of the biggest things that happens in businesses. Once change comes, people fear the fact that they need to learn something new, or that work is going to become more difficult, or they're going to have more work to do. And once they've passed that fear, they realize they were overthinking the situation, and it actually ended up benefiting their experience and their jobs and even their career progression. So I think, again, and that's why CTU regularly hosts webinars on AI, especially in collaboration with Yuan or with Avi, someone like Avi as well, is to share the awareness of the progression of AI, the effect it has on the private and the public sector. And one of the starting points is as simple as just saying training people, making sure they're skilled, making sure they know how to use technology, making sure they become less and less scared of it so that they can become empowered by it. And I think, to me, that's vital.
Amen, sister.
Okay, I think we have any more questions. We still have 10 minutes left on the clock. I think I'm going to keep to my word. I think we should have a second session, maybe a month or so down the line. I would be excited to maybe review the questions again and see how we can incorporate them into a next session. We can even send out a survey to the audience again and suggest if they can propose more topics that they would love us to discuss. Yeah, so I would like to say to the audience, you will all receive a notification via email containing a recording to this session and also some contact details. so that you can, reach out for solutions. We will also have a few people contacting you directly to offer some solutions as well. But please keep an eye out for more of our sessions. We will continuously invest in awareness and education regarding AI, and CT will continue offering solutions in terms of training in this space, and indirectly, like with Excel, as well as directly, like with the AI Academy. I personally just want to say thank you to Johan and Avi for joining us today. I think this was definitely one of the most interesting and exciting discussions to date. Not that the others haven't been. I think this is just very loaded, very important, and very relevant to everyone in our country. So please keep an eye out for our next session. We definitely will keep you informed. Any closing statements from you, Johan and Avi? Please.
Colleen and team, again, thank you. Always well-arranged sessions. Avi, it's so great to see you here again, and super valuable contribution. And just also to everyone who joined us, and for the great questions. I think it was great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I think thanks, guys. It was a nice, well-run session, and looking forward to the future conversations. And I think just a note for the audience, we all need to come together from all the different sectors and play our part in taking this AI revolution forward.
Absolutely. And then I think we can conclude there. Again, we will send out a survey to the attendees for some input on a future session that we can plan. We can make it very specific towards your needs. Thank you very much. I'm going to stay on the line just for a few minutes, just to ensure we've got everyone sorted. But again, Johan, Avi, thank you so much for the very valuable session.
Thank you, guys.